everyone, I am Dhruva. In this video, we will learn about unicellular and multicellular organisms. In this video, we will learn about unicellular and multicellular organisms, characteristics, types, nutrition, reproduction, and respiration. Unicellular organisms. The characteristics of unicellular organisms. The unicellular organisms usually reproduce by asexual means. They can be eukaryotes or prokaryotes. They are found in almost all habitats, from hot springs to frozen tundra. They possess whip-like structures for movement. The nutrients enter or leave the cell by the process of diffusion. Types of unicellular organisms. There are two types of unicellular organisms, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Now we are going to learn about these two types in detail. Prokaryotes are unicellular organisms without a true nucleus. They are very small in size, from 0.1 to 5.0 microns. This facilitates the diffusion of ions and molecules to different parts of the cell. They have a peptidoglycan cell wall. The cell wall helps to maintain the shape of the cell and prevents dehydration. They use flagella for locomotion. They possess fimbriae for attachment to the host cell and pili to exchange genetic material during conjugation. Archaebacteria and eubacteria are a few examples of prokaryotes. Eukaryotes are larger than prokaryotes with a membrane-bound nucleus. The DNA is present in the nucleus of the cell. Eukaryotes can be plant cells or animal cells. The plant cells contains vacuoles, chloroplast, and large central vacuole. These cannot be found in animal cells. Lysosomes and centrosomes are present in animal cells and not in plant cells. Eukaryotes include protozoa and protista. Nutrition in unicellular organisms. Unicellular organisms feed on other organisms or liquid matter. The digestion is intracellular. Larger particles are ingested by phagocytosis or pinocytosis. The smaller sized particles enter into the cell through osmosis and diffusion. Reproduction in unicellular organisms. The unicellular organisms reproduce by binary fission. In this, a single cell divides, giving rise to two daughter cells. This can be seen in bacteria and amoeba. The yeast cells reproduce by the process called budding. Sometimes, amoeba reproduces by the process called encysting. During unfavorable conditions, it forms a protective covering around itself called a cyst. This cyst contains chitin that helps it to reproduce. Respiration in unicellular organisms. The unicellular organisms respire aerobically and anaerobically. They do not have any respiratory structures for respiration. They respire by the process of diffusion through the skin surface. Unicellular organisms examples: Escherichia coli, diatoms, protozoa, protista, streptococcus, pneumococci, dinoflagellates. Multicellular organisms. The characteristics of multicellular organisms. Multicellular organisms are made of more than one cell and are complex organisms. They are visible to the naked eye. They possess distinct organs and organ systems. They are eukaryotes, that is, they contain membrane-bound structures. Their cells exhibit division of labor. Their size increases with the number of cells in an organism. Following are the important examples of multicellular organisms: humans, dogs, cows, cats, chicken, trees, horse. Nutrition in multicellular organisms. They obtain nutrients by diffusion, facilitated diffusion, or active transport across their cell membrane. It is made up of more than one cell. Many multicellular animals have two bodily openings with a distinctive anterior and posterior and a digestive tube that connects both the openings. Reproduction in multicellular organisms. Asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction produces offsprings that are genetically identical to the parents because the offsprings are all clones of the original parent. This type of reproduction occurs in prokaryote microorganisms and in some eukaryotic single-celled and multi-celled organisms. Animals may reproduce asexually through fission, budding, fragmentation, or parthenogenesis. Fission, also called binary fission, occurs in prokaryotic microorganisms and in some invertebrates, multi-celled organisms. After a period of growth, an organism splits into two separate organisms. Some unicellular eukaryotic organisms undergo binary fission by mitosis. In other organisms, part of the individual separates, forming a second individual. This process occurs, for example, in many asteroids, echinoderms through splitting of the central disk. Some sea anemones and some coral polyps also reproduce through fission. Budding is a form of asexual reproduction that results from the outgrowth of the part of a cell or body region leading to the separation from the original organisms into two individuals. Budding occurs commonly in some invertebrate animals such as corals and hydra. In hydras, a bud forms that develops into an adult which breaks away from the main body, whereas in coral budding, the bud does not detach and multiplies as a part of a new colony. Fragmentation. Fragmentation is the breaking of a body into two parts with subsequent regeneration. If the animal is capable of fragmentation and the part is big enough, a separate individual will regrow. Many sea stars reproduce asexually by fragmentation. For example, if the arm of an individual sea star is broken off, it will regenerate a new sea star. Fishery workers have been known to try to kill the sea stars that eat their clam or oyster beds by cutting them in half and throwing them back into the ocean. Unfortunately for the workers, the two parts can regenerate a new half, resulting in twice as many sea stars to prey upon the oysters and clams. Fragmentation also occurs in annelid worms, turbellarians, and poriferans. Note that in fragmentation, there is generally a noticeable difference in the size of the individuals, whereas in fission, two individuals of approximately the same size are formed. Parthenogenesis. Parthenogenesis is a form of asexual reproduction where an egg develops into a complete individual without being fertilized. The resulting offspring can be either haploid or diploid, depending on the process and the species. Parthenogenesis occurs in invertebrates such as water fleas, rotifiers, aphids, stick insects, some ants, wasps, and the bees. Bees use parthenogenesis to produce haploid males and diploid females. If an egg is fertilized, a queen is produced. The queen bee controls the reproduction of the hive bees to regulate the type of bee produced. Some vertebrate animals such as certain reptiles, amphibians, and fish also reproduce through parthenogenesis. Although more common in plants, parthenogenesis has been observed in animal species that were segregated by sex in terrestrial or marine zoos. Two Komodo dragons, a bony-tailed shark, and a black-tipped shark have produced parthenogenic young when the females have been isolated from the males. Sexual reproduction is a combination of two reproductive cells from two individuals to form a third unique offspring. Sexual reproduction produces offspring with novel combinations of genes. This can be an adaptive advantage in unstable or unpredictable environments. We are used to thinking of animals having two separate sexes, male and female, determined at conception. However, in the animal kingdom, there are many variations on this theme. Hermaphroditism. Hermaphroditism occurs in animals where one individual has both male and female reproductive parts. Invertebrates, such as earthworms, slugs, tapeworms, and snails, are often hermaphroditic. Hermaphrodites may self-fertilize or may mate with another of their species, fertilizing each other and both producing offsprings. Self-fertilization is common in animals that have limited mobility or are not motile, such as barnacles and clams. Respiration in multicellular organisms. For small multicellular organisms, diffusion across the outer membrane is sufficient to meet their oxygen needs. Gas exchange by direct diffusion across the surface membranes is sufficient for organisms less than 1 millimeter in diameter. Thank you. Subscribe now. Stay home. Stay safe.
Oh.